Hello and welcome to B'nai Abraham Chabad. Welcome to the bright side. We're going to begin with the prayer, Psalm 121. Shir Lamalois Esa Einai Alaharim Me'ayin Yavai Ezri Me'im Adinoi Oisei Shamayim Va'aretz Al Yitein Lamoit Raglecha Al Yonam Shemrecha Hine Lo Yonam V'Leishon Shomer Yisrael Adinoi Shemrecha Adinoi Tzilcha Al Yad Yiminecha Yoimam HaShemesh Lo Yakeka V'Yarech Ba'Loila Adinoi Yishmar Chamikol Ra Yishmar Es Nafshecha Adinoi Yishmar Tzeischa V'Yacha Mayatav Ad Olam. A song of ascents, I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help will come from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot falter, your guardian does not slumber. Indeed, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your guardian, the Lord is your protective shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. The Lord will guard your going and your coming from now and for all time. If you have a pushka, a tzedakah box nearby, please join me for the mitzvah of tzedakah. Our guests today are Larry and Susan Schiffman. Susan is a doctor of dental surgery, and Larry is a retired internist and rheumatologist, and we welcome them to the bright side. Welcome, Larry and Susan. Thank you for joining us today on the Bright Side program.
Oh, pleasure.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, Susan, tell us a little bit about your dentistry work pre-pandemic and the type of people that you were helping in the community.
Well, we moved here in 2015, and I had already been practicing for almost 40 years, but I was happy to find a position in a dental office in Kensington in a very mixed neighborhood. Practice was quite different from what I was used to before in Massachusetts, but I grew to love it. It closed in March because of the pandemic, but up until then, we had a wide diversity of patients. We saw a lot of welfare patients, as well as private patients and cash patients, and lots of different kinds of people. And it was fast-paced and rewarding. We had a lot of emergencies. We took care of people in pain. We helped a lot of people get much better smiles so they could go out in the world and feel good about themselves. We did hundreds of dentures and partial dentures, and I loved it. I loved the patients and the staff, and meeting all kinds of people that I never had experience with before. So yes, and I was there from 2015 until March when the office closed. And at this point, I probably won't go back until there's a vaccine, and it's uncertain, but I do miss it every day.
So the office, it sounds like the people that you were helping with dentistry were people that may not have had access to a dentist without your office being there.
That's correct. I think it's an underserved area. I had some patients who had never seen a dentist before.
Wow.
And all kinds of people. And we were able to really help some people change and get better. You could really see the difference. It was quite a different feel from some of the practices I had worked in Massachusetts, some more high-end practices, which were great in their way. But I ended up, this was probably my favorite position of all the places I've been, all the places I've worked at.
Must have been really rewarding, as you said.
Most all of your patients were in pain.
Well, that's what brought probably more than half of the patients through the door was a problem, pain.
Right.
We were able to help them. And the good part was when they kept coming back, when you presented a complete treatment plan and they were willing to carry it through. And that was great because those were people who wouldn't have gotten care otherwise.
Sure. And as of March, the office has just been closed.
They closed, all the dental offices closed in Philadelphia. Now a lot of them are open, but when I left, I was the only dentist working there. There was another person very part-time, and I choose not to return until it's safe, and the other person didn't return. So they'd actually like to open, and they're looking for another dentist now, but so far they haven't found somebody.
Okay, maybe one of our listeners will volunteer.
If anyone out there knows a dentist, I have a great position for you.
Yeah.
Okay, we can definitely connect you. Larry, tell us about your experience as a doctor back in Massachusetts.
So we moved here when I retired at the request of our son, who, as you know, lived here at that time, and they then left a year after we had moved here. But Susan and I, love Philadelphia and decided this is a great place to be for us, and we can still get to our family pretty easily using public transportation. So I practiced for about 40 years as a rheumatologist in Northampton, Massachusetts. My patients were, well, like Susan's patients, they were always in pain. They weren't, they suffered from arthritis, the most common being rheumatoid arthritis, but many, many different types of arthritis and autoimmune illnesses. So it was a challenging type of practice. Patients were not just seen on a one-time basis, but routinely over the course of time because they had chronic illness. So I got very close to many of the patients. And what they taught me was an important lesson because they lived in pain from day to day. They had pain and disability that disallowed them from living anything near a normal life. I mean, many of them couldn't dress, they couldn't do a button, many of them couldn't cut food, they would have to have assistance in eating, and other activities of daily living were always a struggle. And yet these people almost universally had a positive attitude. They didn't come to complain, they came to report and to see what help they could get. And it was really an inspiration, and it made it hard for me to complain about the small stuff.
Puts it in perspective.
Yes, tremendously so.
How did you manage to attract only patients with positive attitudes?
Really, really. That is, I honestly think that these patients, it's an illness that slowly proceeds over time. Sometimes people get lucky and have a remission, I don't know, they see life differently from other people. They're really unique and have a greater appreciation and balance in their life for the good versus the bad.
So perhaps their personal challenges were actually there to help them discover their inner potential, the strength of the human spirit that was able to surface as a result of these medical difficulties that they were facing.
They have to be brave and persevering and willing to try different ways of doing things, something that we all need to try to emulate.
Right. So both of you being in the healthcare world and now living through this pandemic, you must have a very unique perspective of how you digest all the information that's out there in terms of how we navigate these turbulent times. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of your perspective.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
Really. I dealt with patients who became ill, but never with a pandemic. This is really unique to all of our experience. And really, I think we're learning as we go here. Susan and I try to maintain a good attitude, as my patients did, and to put things into perspective. One thing about this pandemic is that it really does have an end. There will be a light at the end of this tunnel, whereas for my patients, that wasn't the case. They were likely to get worse over the course of time, and we have something wonderful to look forward to getting back to normal when medical science has developed a vaccination or antibody treatments that will protect us.
So it helps to put that in perspective. Yes, definitely a life-changing experience, but one that will change. And the question perhaps that we ask ourselves is, how will we as individuals respond to this change? How will this have affected us in terms of our mindsets, in terms of our attitudes, in terms of perseverance and the ability to overcome obstacles and challenges, real obstacles and challenges that most of us have never faced before?
I think it will change us forever. At least for me, before this happened, I took so much for granted around me. And then now that I'm not working for the first time maybe ever in my life, I have so much time to reflect and think about what I have. I've always been working or taking care of children or been in school until March. And suddenly, I can't take anything for a given. I appreciate so much of what we have. Larry and I still have a beautiful life here together. It's quite different from what we had before, but we're blessed. We have a beautiful house, and I have time for the first time in years to concentrate much more on music. I play the violin and viola, and I'm taking piano lessons. I'm reading one book after another, and it used to take me months to read a single book. I'm getting to know my husband better than ever, although we'll be married 45 years in a couple of weeks. And yeah, I think as terrible as all this is, when it's over, I think I'll look back on it and miss some things about it.
That's a really beautiful, bright side that you've shared with us. The opportunity that we have to deepen relationships, reflect on the blessings in our lives, and express gratitude for those blessings more than before, because, as you said, we've learned that you can't take anything for granted.
I'd been thinking about how to respond to this. Why would such a thing occur? And the good thing for me is that for sure it's making me rethink important things that I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have bothered to rethink going through the course of life as it had been before. But so I wanted to ask you, if I could, about what do the sages, what does Jewish wisdom teach us about pandemics? Is it meant as something that redirects us, that brings us back to God and to the right, to a path?
To break the news, I don't have a why. We all ask why. Our faith is questioned during turbulent times. Throughout Jewish history, people who have gone through personal or national challenges, they have their faith has been questioned, and they've asked why. But for me, the way I see it is that if we look back at Jewish history, and we look back at the thousands of years of Jewish survival, Jews have suffered epidemics, pandemics, extermination, persecution, all types of threats to their very existence. And more than asking why, they've asked what. In other words, what can I do about it? Why did God put me here in this particular set of circumstances and given me the skills, the resources, the gifts at my disposal to be able to help or care for another? In other words, of course, we can ponder the philosophic questions of why, and ultimately we'll never know the answer because we're mortal, we're finite beings, and we see a very, very small part of the picture. God, who is infinite, sees the full picture and is orchestrating events in some way without asking us our opinion, where we're certainly, in many ways, this is out of our control. And so we can't really control the circumstances, but we certainly can respond and control how we react to those circumstances. And as Jews, we have an obligation to think about the teachings of the Torah that continue to guide us and continue to allow us to challenge ourselves to make the world a better place, to find that bright side, to find a way that we can be there for others and make other people's lives a little bit easier. You mentioned before the opportunity that we have for relationships. So while we're strengthening our own relationships, perhaps this has been a time that we can think about friends, acquaintances, relatives that we may not be in touch with all the time. And we have now opportunities to reach out to them with love, reach out to them with an offer to care and to help them in some way. And this, I believe, is the greatest response that we can have as people of faith, that while we can't control the circumstances, we can certainly do something about it and challenge ourselves to do something positive, starting with thinking about what are those gifts that God has given me and how can I use those to make other people happier, to make other lives better, and to help other people see the bright side.
That's
Right. Yeah, that's a very good way of looking at it. Yeah. So, this pandemic has shaken things up, and so we're in a position where we can sort of re-examine. But I see what you mean to ask. The sort of the bigger question. Our problem is that we are not big. We are just a small part of a picture that we can't really see the length and depth of to answer questions. It's an unanswerable question, as many are.
So we have to ask ourselves, what's the next right thing to do? We can do that.
That we can do.
Right. And in terms of our faith, we have two concepts in Jewish thought. One is called Emunah, which is faith. Faith is something that we have in the background all the time. But then there's another step called bitachon, which means trust. And so trust is something that we sometimes access only when there's a problem. When there's a problem, then I need to rely on something deeper than my faith, which may be superficial, and try to discover that sense of deeper trust that I have in God. So in a relationship, it's all about trust. we are in a relationship with God. We have faith in God. We believe in a good God. And therefore, even when we don't understand how something is good, our faith tells us that it's for the good, that God is somehow orchestrating things that can be good, and hopefully we'll get to see that. But trust goes to the next level. Trust says, not only can it be good, but it will be good. Through that positive mindset, through that optimistic hope that we have ingrained within us, we develop a sense of trust. We internalize that trust so that we can experience that relationship in a way that's real. So it's not just a superficial faith in God, but it's a relationship that we've invested in, and we continue to work on that relationship to the point where we can begin to trust. And that's hard work. Like any relationship, the more you put into it, the more you'll gain and benefit from it. So very much, I look at the relationship that we have with each other as a metaphor for the relationship that we have with God, and that the more we study, the more we reflect, and the more we act in ways of spreading goodness and kindness to others, the more we'll be able to access that inner level of trust that will allow us to remain positive, that will allow us to remain faithful and optimistic, that it is all for the good.
That's very helpful.
Yes.
So you turned the tables. Instead of me interviewing you, you decided to interview me.
Yeah. No, and I was just, you made me think of a little anecdote from my practice. I had a woman who was doing okay with rheumatoid arthritis, and then she took a turn for the worse, and she became quite disabled. She had been divorced for years, and her children were wonderful, and they made it possible for her to be independent. But eventually, it didn't look like she was going to be able. They would be able to handle it. And then her husband shows up again after a long divorce. And to make a long story short, they remarried. So he remarried, when she was disabled.
Beautiful ending of the story. So I think we can all find the bright sides in our own lives, and we can also be the bright side for others. And we have to actually, I think we have to be proactive about it. We have to search opportunities for not just maintaining our own sanity and surviving it, but in order to be able to thrive, in order to be able to rise to the challenge. This is a challenging time for everyone, and how can we be there for others? Think of others who may be able to use our help, and in getting through these times. So that's a practical takeaway.
Sure. Yeah.
Have you been able to spend some quality time with your grandchildren?
Well, that's been the bright side for us. We always saw our grandchildren, but since March they've been in Stone Harbor on the Jersey Shore, and we go every week and spend 2 or 3 full days with them. So we've gotten to know them much better. We feel much closer to them, and it's wonderful. I'll always miss that when they go back to school and things return to them. We'll never have that again. And even our 6-year-old granddaughter in Colorado, we used to try to see them every couple of months, and we can't do that now. But what we have been doing is reading to her on Zoom several times a week. And she feels very close. We see her every other day, and we see the teeth she's losing, and
Yeah.
we're getting to know a lot of new books, and we feel very close to her too now. So it's strengthened that relationship as well.
I'm sure they will cherish those memories.
Having the children, that they were, in the Jersey Shore, but they were really totally isolated, and really the only people they saw were us and their parents, and so it really was a good thing for all of us.
It's forced time with the grandparents with no distractions.
We went into nature when we could, and that's
Right.
the only safe place to be these days.
And they would always seem thrilled when we showed up. The car would pull up and they'd come bursting out of the house, calling our names. So we felt like we were really appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that sounds great. I'm happy to hear that you were able to have that opportunity. And God willing, those stronger relationships will continue, and you'll only be able to strengthen them.
I think that's true for sure. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us. It's been a real pleasure hearing your perspective, and God willing, we'll hear and share good news with each other very, very soon.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Be careful. Be safe.
Yes.
And stay positive.
Yes, we'll try very hard.
We will try.
Thank you for your words. That was
Yeah.
very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Take care. Thank you for joining us today on the Bright Side program. If you enjoyed this program, we ask that you consider even a small contribution to B'nai Abraham Chabad to help these programs continue. I want to thank our sponsors for making this possible and wish you a wonderful week.